Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, April 4th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 149 days, the game against Michigan in 240 days. The Ohio State Buckeyes are now officially two-thirds of the way through spring football. They held practice number 10 on Wednesday, and there was a new face inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. It was Carlos Locklyn, the new running backs coach for the Buckeyes. He arrived late Tuesday night into Columbus and then was on the practice field on Wednesday with the Buckeyes. Tony Gerdeman was there as well on Wednesday. He joins me now to talk about what we learned from some of the interviews after that practice. Tony, I guess let's start with Carlos Locklyn. Did not get a chance to talk to him, but will get a chance to do that apparently sometime next week. We did get a chance, however, to talk to a couple of running backs. So what are the first impressions of Carlos Locklyn, Ohio State running backs coach?
Well, I think maybe the most important thing is that these weren't first impressions because all of the running backs knew him. They already knew him from recruiting from Oregon, or when we talked with Dallan Hayden. He was familiar with him from when Locklyn was in Memphis because that's where Dallan Hayden is from. So more first impressions on the field as a coach were that he was pretty quiet today. And I think when you look at Carlos Locklyn, you're like, that dude probably isn't quiet during practice. And he was today. And I think it's just a matter of soaking things in, watching, getting a firsthand view, and you want to see what you've got there. And so he did obviously offer some feedback here and there, but was relatively quiet throughout. And so I asked Quinshon Judkins, is that pretty disconcerting because you're looking for feedback? And he's like, yeah, it was a little odd, but to be expected, I guess. And Dallan Hayden said it was to be expected based on the fact that he's coming in and assessing the situation, seeing what he's working with before really getting into the nitty gritty. But as we've talked about on this show on Buckeye Weekly, Locklyn takes this position very seriously and has talked about how it's the worst coach position in football. So he's doing some studying right now of his players.
Yeah, you figure there's probably a little bit of a ramp up time in terms of figuring out the playbook and the players and how they do things and how they run practice and all that kind of stuff. You're also, if you flew in last night, jet lag, it's a real thing. I can sympathize with the West Coast to East Coast late night flight and having to get up and be a functional adult in the morning. It is not the easiest thing in the world. So that is Carlos Locklyn's first practice at Ohio State. We will get a chance to talk to him next week when he is probably a little better situated in the building and with the players and in terms of all of that stuff, probably on a more normal sleep schedule as well. So we'll have more on him next week. We got the chance to talk to Ohio State Safeties coach Matt Guerrieri as well on Tuesday or Wednesday. Goodness, it has been a week and a half already on Wednesday. And they have had a couple, Caleb Downs is one thing, and we'll get to Caleb Downs in a minute. But some of the younger guys in that room, Jaden Bonsu, Jalen McClain, have made the most of their opportunities this spring with Lathan Ransom still kind of working his way back. There have been more snaps available in that room and with Malik Hartford kind of on the shelf as well. So what did Matt Guerrieri have to say about some of those younger safeties?
Yeah, we saw Jaden Bonsu with the ones on Saturday, so he was asked about, and similar to what Ryan Day had said, that he doesn't make the same mistake twice. He learns from it, and now he's just getting a ton of really good reps, so he's really learning from stuff. And going against really good players and the whole iron sharpening iron thing. So he is growing from that. And he already looks like a college football player. He's listed at like 6'2", 207. So this is a good size safety who they're not necessarily hitting very hard right now, but can eventually do that. And so they like what he's doing and he's continuing to do it. He's, like I said, getting really good reps with Lathan Ransom, just coming back slowly. Jalen McClain, he said that freshman playing free safety is the number 2 free safety right now, most of the time when we see them behind Caleb Downs. And I remember the first time we saw him this spring, he's calling things out. He's running. He's doing things that the free safety has to do, but it's a tough ask for a free safety to be doing that. So Guerrieri said that McClain is one of the guys who scores highest on just getting to the football. And that's not necessarily making plays on the football. It's just tracking the football, running to the football. He's just an effort guy, and he's always heading for the football. So they like that about him as well. So good spring for both of those guys. Bonsu, a redshirt freshman, McClain, the true freshman.
Someone else who is going to score pretty well, another second-year player with a little more experience than those two guys, Caleb Downs, sort of the star of the Ohio State safety room this spring. Matt Guerrieri probably pretty darn happy to be working with a Caleb Downs after being the co-DC at Indiana last year and working with a bunch of Indiana players who, were Big Ten caliber, but are notably not Caleb Downs. So what did Guerrieri have to say about getting a chance to have someone like Caleb Downs in his room?
Yeah, he said he's an elite player, which we would come to expect that. But when you have a player like Caleb Downs who is at the top of his game, it requires the coaches to be at the top of their game as well. And so it's challenging, and it's a good thing for the coaches to have to be challenged by your players to get the most out of yourself, get the most out of your players. And I have found it interesting whenever I think we've done 2 interviews now with Caleb Downs, and reaction from people are like, does he not like this? Is he not having any fun? And he looks like he's just short with his answers at times. And that's just how serious he is. And Denzel Burke was always a very serious guy. He's kind of lightened up, but he still is a truth teller, and he's serious about the business. Caleb Downs is like that to me, just a serious guy who's going to give you some matter-of-fact answers, and would really like to I got to get back and watch some film if we could just speed this along. And so I think that's kind of, I don't think you mind that with the quarterback of your secondary.
If you can cross the honesty of a Denzel Burke with the "can I just go please watch some film" of Tommy Eichenberg, boy, that is like an incredible Voltron of Ohio State football interview styles over the last few years. All right, so Caleb Downs, truth teller, Caleb Downs telling it like it is. He goes up against these wide receivers every day in practice. What are his impressions of the Ohio State wide receiver unit?
Yeah, I asked him about Jeremiah Smith because we saw them going at it a little bit in some of the clips or some of the plays when we were there at practice. But I asked him his impressions, and he said he's a very elite athlete, a very instinctual player. He has great ball skills, and he should have a big impact this year. So then I said, is there anybody that you could compare him to that you've seen before? And he said, no, JJ is his own self. JJ is his own man, Tom. And then somebody else asked him, is there anybody else in that receiver room that is elite? And he said Emeka Egbuka, who he watched in high school, watched last year as well, and said he's an elite receiver then and an elite receiver now. And then he also said that Carnell Tate has had a great spring as well.
Get a chance also on Wednesday to talk to James Laurinaitis, he's turning into one of my favorite interviews because he'll give you stuff that's it's like just a little twist on what you're sort of expecting them to talk about. And he just has a different perspective on things. And we give you a couple examples here. Tony can spell things out a little bit for you. One of them that I thought was really interesting was how, you talk about Ohio State's recruiting these really top players, really elite players, best high school football players in the nation every year at all these position groups. So, you're kind of, if you're a veteran guy and you're trying to win a job or keep a job, you're always kind of looking over your shoulders like, boy, you got all these 5-star guys coming out of high school trying to take your job. He talked about, though, the fact that mentality, having to sort of win your job every day in practice and defend your job every day in practice, kind of prepares you for the NFL.
Yeah, and he being a former 3-star linebacker out of Minnesota talked about how at Ohio State they were trying to recruit over him every year. And I think that's the case for most positions because you're trying to get better and you're not trying to get worse. So you're not just, try to get another James Laurinaitis. No, you're going to try to get a 4-star from Minnesota next time. And so that mentality of the school trying to recruit over you then takes you to the NFL where teams are trying to draft over you. And James Laurinaitis being like, I think a 2nd-round pick, like the all-time leading tackler in St. Louis Rams history. But still, you know what? If you can upgrade that position, and he just carried that mentality with him the entire time. And he mentioned when he was probably a freshman in 2005, watching Marcus Freeman and John Kerr sharing reps and sharing snaps at an outside linebacker position. And his mentality was like, if those guys would have to share reps and battle for a spot, Marcus Freeman being like a former high 4-star guy, and John Kerr being a former starter at Indiana and transferring to Ohio State, like, of course, what chance do I have of holding on to a spot without really, really doing my best? And so I think he's carried that mentality into the NFL, and then probably now as a coach somehow.
And now as a coach, he's trying to recruit the players to trying to hold on to those jobs or to try and win those jobs out from the other guys. And you mentioned he was a 3-star, very unheralded prospect out of Minnesota. He is not recruiting a lot of 3-stars to Ohio State. Ohio State typically is fishing in the deeper end of the pond where the 4 and the 5-star guys live. And Laurinaitis talked about the fact that most of the guys he's recruiting are way more athletic than he is, which gives him this really unique opportunity because he had to do stuff the hard way. So some of these guys, it's not like the old Staples easy button exactly, but it's, you don't necessarily have to scratch and claw quite as much as James Laurinaitis did. But if he can get them to do that, that just raises the ceiling even more.
Yeah, kind of the best of both worlds type of thing. And I did ask him, how do you marry that kind of mentality that you had, but you needed it? And you're recruiting 4-star, 5-star guys that are talented enough, maybe they don't need to claw for it. And he said, you figure that out during the recruiting process, because through dealing and talking with players, you'll find out Ohio State is too big for them. And so you move on. And so that's something that you have to find out in recruiting. But then if you can get that mentality to the players that you've now landed and that are at Ohio State, where they are, the effort is always there. As he said, I'm not coaching effort. That shouldn't have to be something I coach. That should be coming. That's easy. That's one of those no talent things that Ryan Day talks about, and the no talent things that the other coaches talk about. I'm not coaching effort. That should just be there. That is a given. And you coach everything else up. If you don't have to coach up the effort and that's already there, and the playbook aspect of it, like if you are a smart player, not necessarily just the playbook, but don't be a dumb player. If you are a smart player and you have effort, that's half the battle. They'll coach you up on everything else, and that's what set him apart, was the effort and the knowledge of the defense as a player. Because as he said, there are a lot more athletic guys than he was. He was never the most athletic guy, but he did everything else he could to raise his level, and that's what he's trying to pass on to better athletes now.
Well, he will continue trying to pass that on to the better athletes for the next 5 spring practices, ending in the spring game next Saturday, April 13th at noon inside Ohio Stadium. I just pulled up the long-range forecast, and I'm delighted to inform you it is currently calling for 66 degrees and mostly sunshine. Boy, I hope that's it, because that would be a lovely day inside Ohio Stadium. Always look forward to the spring game. Nice chance to get outside and see some football and see everyone in person again. Nice if it was sunny and warm as well. We will be there covering all of that for you at BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can get tickets at OhioStateBuckeyes.com. $10 a ticket right now. Tickets still available, and you can watch it on national TV. I keep saying that because at some point I will believe that it is true. Nationally televised spring game on Fox next Saturday from Ohio Stadium. We'll be covering all sorts of stuff in the lead up to that game for the next week or so, week and a half, at BuckeyeHuddle.com and YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. A lot to talk about. We talked on yesterday's show about some of the unresolved position battles. A lot of these young guys getting a chance to step up and make a bigger impression on the coaching staff, perhaps win a bigger role this fall. Lots of interesting stuff happening there. It's been a very busy week for the Ohio State basketball program, men's and women's actually, as well, with people going into the transfer portal, people saying they're going to stick around for another year, a transfer portal addition for the men's basketball team. We're going to get to that at some point this week. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope you will join us there to talk about all of that and much more. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.